All right, if you have been drawn to this Women Who Make an Impact series, you might just be a woman who wants to make an impact. And if you are, I honor you, I see you, and you are in the right space, my friend. I am going to bring to you today an incredible woman who has made an enormous impact, and I cannot wait for you to meet Naketa Thigpen. In this episode, what I'm most eager for you to hear is her perspective on what it takes to make an impact and what a real intentional impact actually looks like. She talks about the responsibility we have as women making an impact and the comparison between being accessible and being available and what that means and how that influences our ability to be our best for others. She also talks about being intentionally selfish. Whoa, whoa, so good. In this episode, you're going to hear about creating space to hear your own brilliance, your own inner brilliance, and why that matters when we make an impact. I cannot wait for you to also find out what little Naketa wanted to be when she grew up and how beautifully that's translated into the woman she is today. I cannot say enough about this incredible woman. When you hear her speak, you're just going to be wowed by the melodic way that she uses language and poetry in the way she speaks. You're going to be absolutely transformed in this beautiful conversation with some powerful nuggets to help you in your journey to make impact. You know, I don't even want to say any more right now. I just invite you to join me as we listen to this incredible episode. And I introduce to you my friend Naketa. Hello, and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and guys, today is going to be such an incredible day. Welcome, first of all, to the Women Who Make an Impact series. Ladies, if you're out there listening to this series, welcome. You are in the right place. If you are one of those women who has been dreaming about making an impact, dreaming about leaving a legacy, about being a disruptor in the space where you are, and about really having inspiration and impact on the world around you. And today I am so honored to welcome a new friend of mine, but it feels like we've known each other forever already. We're old friends at this point. An incredible woman who I admire enormously, who has made huge impact in her world and in the personal development world. And this, my friends, is Naketa Thigpen, the #1 balance and relationship advisor in the world. She is superior at activating power couples and potent humans who privately identify with witty, tongue-in-cheek humor as the lazy overachievers. And almost all of her clients are founders and entrepreneurs and making impact themselves. And she's helping them make those audacious milestones and changes in their world. She's formally trained as a licensed clinical social worker. She is a psychotherapist, trauma specialist, sexologist, and relationship expert. And I cannot wait for you to get to know her as I have learned to discover the magic that is Naketa. So welcome.
Oh my goodness. I want to take you on the road with me and have you introduce me everywhere I go. So let's change your hat impacting the world to just be with me and be my person.
You are magic, my friend. You are magic. And when I was, cultivating this series of women who make an impact, I just knew that you had to be a part of this. So I'm so excited to have you here because what I know is that common desire to leave a legacy of change, to disrupt what we know is the status quo, is so powerful when you meet another woman who's got that draw, who's got that urge. You know it, you see it in her eyes.
That's right.
And I know that so many women listening to this beautiful podcast are feeling like they're in that same position. And what I really want to understand from someone who has actually done so, what does it take? That's where we're going today. What does it take? And so as we start this out, I want to know a little bit more about what impact means to you.
Yeah, that's you. First of all, powerful setup. Let me say that. Powerful setup. I feel like I'm about to make my 3-point shot and I'm not even a sports person. So besides watching all the guys run around in cute shorts while I'm sitting next to my husband, like, yeah, go, having no idea what's happening on the screen. Impact for me is part of the story. I think you can be impacted in so many ways. I was impacted when I first met you not too many moons ago, right? I was impacted at seeing I know people have challenges with this word, but I dare say synergy that was created. Impact can be momentary. And I think that's the challenge. Like we go to a lot of conferences, events, retreats, TED Talks, we go to all the things, and it is powerful. It is magnificent. It is amazing energy that is impactful. But if we don't actually embody whatever we pulled away from it, it doesn't leave the imprint. And so for me, I think the impact is a part of the story. And I am one of those people that like to complete things. I don't want to start a book. I want to finish a book. I don't want to start listening to a podcast episode or just one episode from an amazing show. I want to listen to as many of them as possible so I can feel like I really understand the host and understand their ways and the nuances, which is why I love the Business of Happiness podcast so much, because I feel like your stories are threaded through from episode to episode. So impact to me is a really crucial step in creating the story of whatever book you're working on. And I mean this philosophically. You don't have to actually be an author, but I do want you to recognize that your life is not just full of chapters, it's full of books that are full of chapters. And I think impacting is just a part of those chapters woven through the many, many books that you'll create in your life.
Oh, so such a great answer, because you brought up a couple of really interesting components. And that is that impact doesn't have to be an enormous multi-person 10,000 people shift, but impact can be really enormous in just one person in one moment.
Yes, 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 and yes, on so many levels. It's the microshifts for us. Like what do the young people say on Instagram? Like, it's the so and so for me, like that thing, like it's for me. It's the microshifts for me. It's not just the big paradigm shift, which is phenomenal, but can also be very overwhelming. We all in this globe just went through a paradigm shift in 2020, right? Like it was enormous. It was unsolicited. It was disruptive. And there was also a gift in it for many of us that were able to extract the gift from it. But it was so big and so overwhelming that for many other people, it was hard to extract the gifts because it was just this big thing that turned your family, turned your life, turned your business, turned your career, turned your clients' lives upside down. And then you had to start with the micro shifts for kind of containing what was falling into your sphere, into your ecosystem. And when you can start with micro shifts, whenever we're allowed to do that, when we intentionally set ourselves up in a direction of getting something complete, whatever that is. And the complete might be, for me, it was allowing myself to be passionate in the many different areas. Like I'm the only person in my nuclear family that doesn't know how to draw and doesn't have like a traditional creative talent. My son is an amazing painter and poet and all the things. My husband is an incredible writer and he's an artist and all the things. My daughter is like a triple threat in her artistry and all the things. And I don't have any of their creative talents, but I am super creative because all of my creativity is in my brain. Like it's all in the beautiful solutions that I'm able to create to things and the way that I envision and see the world and the way that I process information. I'm constantly creating. I'm an analytical creative. But if I looked at the impact that they can make on a canvas versus what I can do when I'm just sitting in myself, when I'm being with me and picturing all the beautiful things, and then I pour that on a canvas, it might look like some serious abstract art, but there was layers of time dimensions woven into that visualization that someone might just see as 4 different shades of color, right? Like we're all creative in our own different way. And I think the micro shifts that we choose to use allow us to see the beauty, or we can look at the comparison of what it isn't. And I think that's the bigger thing from the mix of quote unquote paradigm shift, which is important and wonderful, but very overwhelming, which also can be the comparison. I didn't have the paradigm shift that Tarryn had, or Naketa had, or Tina or Tom had, but I have these micro shifts, and those things can make you fly faster than some of the paradigm shifts that overwhelm us like a hurricane or a tsunami.
Oh, so good. And so within that, the possibility for impact lies within each of us.
Yes.
And what you said is the power of the impact is being true to yourself authentically, being true to your version of what impact looks like and honoring it.
Yes. Yes. I want to shake my maracas. See, you guys don't know this, but Tarryn knows that I have maracas sitting on my desk just waiting to come out. And I'm trying to respect the audio of the microphone and crashing into your ears. But yes.
I love that, the celebration of that. And I really love a word that you used at the beginning. You said making an impact and then allowing for it to imprint,
Yes.
which is such a very important distinction because impact can be that tsunami, that hurricane. It makes one moment that brings awareness, right? Because I think
Yes.
that's what we're talking about is creating
Mhm.
awareness, whether it's on a global scale or a scale of a community or just a single person or a single moment in time. Impact creates awareness, but it's the imprinting of it. So awareness, step one, but it doesn't really hold water unless there's an imprinting of it for
Yeah.
long-term change.
And honestly, it's really like psychology 101 when we think about what happens in most therapy offices, right? In order for your person, your therapist, your advisor, whoever that person is, your psychiatrist, to be able to truly help you get to the root of whatever the dysfunction is that brought you into the office, you have to be self aware. You have to recognize that there is a challenge or a problem. And that is a huge thing. I don't want to minimize it by any stretch because for many people, their nervous system is in such survival skill mode, right? Like everything is fight, flight, fawn, like everything is out of body instead of being in the body, which is scary because that's where your trauma is. That's where your tribulations are. It's also where your triumph is. But some of us are so inundated, and I was one of those people at one time as well. So this is not a judgment for anyone listening. When you're so inundated by the fear that pulls you away from being in touch with yourself on the inside because you don't feel safe with
Mm,
you, you're
mm,
afraid of you, you're worried about what your trauma, what your tribulations are going to cause you to have to face or reface and be in this space of rumination with all of the harder part, and you can't see that there's huge deep capacity for joy that was dug out when all of that pain erupted like a volcano, right? Like there's a hole in the volcano, there's depth inside the volcano, and it could be really hot if you're not careful, right? Like you do have to be mindful. But when you're in a therapist's office, just as an example, because I'm a balance and relationship advisor these days. I don't serve as a therapist anymore, even though I still have all those licenses because I'm a nerd, guys. Work with it. But when that happens and you have someone that says, let me create the space, not make you, let me create the space where you're safe enough to be self aware, that is only the one step. Or else you'll become that person at the barbecue that we all have, one of those cousins or uncles. They're like, that's just John. That's just Tina. That's just how they are, because we've been excusing their behavior because all we have or all they have had is self awareness. They didn't move beyond that. They're aware that they can be not so kind. They're aware that they can let lots of things fly out their mouth and not care about who is present or who is impacted by it. And for a moment or for the imprinting that comes. And we've allowed them to just be self aware because no one has said, hey, look, Uncle John, I think it's amazing that you are aware that you have problems and you keep saying things like, I'm a work in progress. I am so grateful that you are aware. And in parentheses, what are you doing to support yourself in making some progress towards becoming a different version of who you are, stepping into a new chapter, or perhaps closing that book and starting a new one? None of us really do that, and we don't do it with ourselves either. And I think that's where the imprinting can come from, is when you're willing to move past that and look at the emotion, the yucky shame and guilt and rage and frustration, the depression, all of the things that's coming up and kind of calcified over your ability to see your joy, which is not external, it's internal. But all of those things are calcified over like cement inside the volcano, and everyone is afraid to chip away at it. But when you're doing it in a guided and safe space, then you can get to it and you can see that the hot is not bad. It's where it's supposed to be. It's there for a reason. And this beautiful mountain became what it is because of all of the gorgeousness of the volcano when it appropriately had a space to, burst out, but it shouldn't be bursting and hitting all the villagers, right? Like you don't want to kill the very thing that you want to be beautiful for, if that makes sense.
Makes so much sense. The collateral damage is what we're trying to avoid. Yeah. But that explosion needs to happen. And
Yeah.
that beautiful uncovering. Oh, so beautiful. I love your imagery when you're speaking. It's just so beautiful. And the words you use, Naketa, I absolutely love it. What you mentioned that you had experienced this yourself, that you'd gone through this journey. And I know that you walk the walk and you talk the talk. Everything that you say, you've lived yourself. What needed to shift for you to make that impact? So from baby therapist Naketa to actually making true impact in people's lives, what needed to shift?
Oh God, that's such a good question. So when I went from know-it-all Naketa, that's not a thing, I promise. I'm not trying to make it a thing. But when I really was leaning so heavily on credentials, credibility, all the things that do stamp like, oh wow, you were smart enough to pass that board. You were smart enough to do this license, right? Like you were smart enough. When I stopped leaning on that by recognizing why, I know people hate that word, but why do you want this? Why are you doing this? Why are you like that? Because we want to just get by it, right? We want to just all of the things. When I really gave it some thought and sat with it and sat in the yuck and surrendered to my why, like, why am I doing this? Oh, because when my step grandfather, who was my abuser, one of many, would wake me up with get up stupid. Like when those things happen, there was an imprint in little Naketa that said, you're not smart enough. Right. So all the education, all the certification, all the degrees and the certifications and the degrees and all the things in between that I don't even talk about most of the time was really me trying to prove that I was smart enough, that I
Trying
wasn't
to
stupid.
heal that wound.
Absolutely. And without acknowledging that the wound was there, which was the tricky part. Like, how do you heal something you won't even recognize is really truly a problem? And it was like, oh, I'm over that because I did my therapy. I totally went for 3+ years every single week. Like I put somebody's kids through college with the amount of money that I was spending on therapy. Like I did it to address the hurt, but I didn't address the ripple. I didn't address how it was showing up for me. And at the time in my career, but eventually in my business, in my marriage, my husband and I have been together since we were 17, like all of the things, and my parenting, in my French, my platonic, like girlfriend sisterships, all of it, as well as your like business partnerships. The therapy didn't help me with those things. And part of it wasn't because of the therapist. It was because I wasn't ready to acknowledge that those things were being impacted. That self-awareness on that other side wasn't recognized because I did what I thought was the really dirty work, which was the real rooted, how did this impact you wanting to have kids? Like that kind of work. And when I really started to look at like, okay, Miss Know-It-All Naketa, you know a lot of these things because you help other people with them, right? Because that's always the challenge when you're the helper who also needs help.
That's it.
Right. And I was really, really challenged, like, oh my God, what does this look like for me to need help? As brilliant as I am, as smart as I am, as validated as all these things have done, how does it look for you to need help? Well, when you're in pain enough, when your skin feels like it's peeling off physically, emotionally, spiritually, all the things, you really don't care what the stamp is on the person's white coat of what they're wearing when you are burning in the middle of the street. You're like, I just need someone to help me. I don't care who sees me getting help. Like, please stop the burning. And when I decided to be the person that was strong enough to be vulnerable and say, I don't care who's looking. I don't care that other people are seeing me reach out in need and say, listen, I hired Dr. Tarryn for, right? Like
Mhm.
when I stopped being the person that wanted to do all of the things in secret, and I'm a pretty private person, private as in you got to have the right question to ask me before I answer, honestly. But if you ask the right question and I feel like you're not doing it with an agenda to be mean spirited, I will absolutely open up and spill everything. You can ask me what's in my bank account. I'll tell you all the things if I know it's coming from a space of integrity. But I stopped caring about all of the what ifs, the what if people find out, and started looking at what if people find out in a good way? What if people find out that you were strong enough to reach out for support? What kind of imprint can you leave for your son, for your daughter, for your grandson, for your granddaughter, for your cousins, for your nieces, for your nephews, for anyone who has been worthy of you opening up and sharing that because they're not coming with some mean spirited trolling kind of agenda? What ripple does that make? Is that just impactful, or can you make an imprint? And because I am driven to build stronger families that create these new multi-generational imprints from their own self-actualized wholeness, I had to be a reflection of that, Tarryn. And I realized that I was out of alignment. It was no way for me to be a reflection of something that I wasn't actually immersed in, that I actually wasn't doing. You could read all of the CV, you could do all that and be like, oh, she's done such great things. She's helped all these families. But what is she doing for her? How is she really living? How is she handling conflict in her relationships? How is she handling boundaries? What is she doing about allowing herself to be available but not accessible? How is she actually living versus what she's teaching? And when I decided to embody those things, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of tears. It was a lot of laughter, a lot of play, a lot of ability to be like, oh, there was a time, and we can go back into various interviews that I did 7, 8 years ago. I remember saying, oh, I'm not creative. I'm just really analytical, because I was comparing my creativity to the people in my house who can actually make things. And I was comparing my creativity to them. And I realized, with advice, with an advisor, Naketa, you are creative in so many different ways. Like, let's pull it apart and look at it. And I realized I make a lot of things that are tangible. I just don't do it with my hands. I do it with my gift, which happens to be in my mouth.
Yeah. And beautifully so. Absolutely so beautiful. It's so interesting, that distinction of understanding why you're wanting to make the imprint, the impact. And I want to circle back to that, because you had mentioned how many of us who are healers and helpers need healing and helping.
Come
And
on.
I know it.
Mhm.
And I think, if you agree with me, so many of us are drawn to the healing professions because of those wounds, with great, beautiful intention,
Yes.
always, but not recognizing that the healing is so valuable and so powerful in terms of having an impact on someone else when we do go through that process.
1000%. I had someone ask me a long time ago, why did you decide to go into evidence-based social science? Like, what drove you there? Because my undergraduates, I have a triple degree in psychology, sociology, and anthropology
Yes, you
before
do.
all the things, right? And for me, it was part wanting to prove that I was smart, right? Smart enough to do it, because I was also a pre-med student at the same time, because I'm a glutton for punishment. Like, I don't know why thought I was going to do all that, but I tried. That's the door
Yeah.
that I walked through. And most of it was honestly because I was trying to figure out myself and my
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
Like, I was legit trying to figure out why they did certain things and why they didn't do certain things. Like, how could I was raised with these amazing women, these very powerful women who were not accomplished by anybody's portfolio statement, who worked 3, 4, and 5 jobs. They knew how to work, no question. They always were in survival mode, but they knew how to work. I could never not say that I didn't come from ambition from a hardworking perspective. But what I saw was women who were incredible, who were constantly under the foot of the men that they were with, that they typically attracted into them, because it wasn't the first one, it wasn't the second one, it wasn't the third one, right? Like there was like a constant. I have a running joke. I don't even know how many times my grandmother, who raised me, I can't count how many times she's been married. I'm like, not even joking. Like it's funny, not funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we can totally laugh like, oh, okay, Renee had it, right? Like we can, make jokes around it and have a good time with it. And also, all of them were so similar in how horrible they were to her and her children and to her adult children. And what she did and how she changed herself to fit the myopic way that they wanted her to be, not how they saw her, but how they wanted her to be, and how they tried to break a piece of her spirit with each and every engagement, each and every wedding certification, like all the things. And we saw it, and we looked at her children, my mother included, and like saw it. And I was like, wait, something ain't right here. I've been working 3, 4, 5 jobs since I was 12 years old, legitimately. I never had one job by itself until I became an entrepreneur. That was the first time, which is like laughable because you're really the,
Yeah, you're wearing a million
chief
hats.
everything
Exactly.
officer, right? Like, but that was the first time. I also got to see myself for the first time in a different way when I became an entrepreneur. And that was a big eye opening for me too. Like, again, those micro shifts versus the paradigm shift sometimes are exactly what you needed. And for me, it was honestly looking at what was really good, always looking for the good. I'm a strength-based psychotherapist. Like I'm always coming from that. What was really good and what was sufficient for survival, but won't help you, quote unquote, thrive in the next level. And being willing to do the work, not just because I had the tools myself, but knowing the doctor and the patient should be separate. You should separate yourself, even though that you're also a doctor. There's a time to be that, and there's a time to be patient. And yes, you should use your doctor knowledge of like, okay, preventative, hello, like, not to eat all of the fried foods. Like, some things not to do just because of your knowledge. But in terms of your accountability, in terms of your safe place to be able to say, Tarryn, I'm struggling. I'm really having a hard time here. I need to have this safe space with you because yes, I have my lover. Yes, I have, adult friends that we can turn up and have wine and cheese and all the things. But there is nothing like having that person that is unbiased and literally wants nothing for you. They don't want to take off their earrings and put on some Vaseline and come to bat with you, right? They want to secure you in enough coping skills and tools and techniques and strategies that you don't have to take off the earrings and put on the Vaseline because someone has knocked you off your square that way. Yeah. There's nothing better. And I had to do that level of work to make the changes.
Amazing. You mentioned a separation and a detachment that has to happen in terms of taking care of yourself so that you could be there for everyone else. I'd love to also get your perspective on detachment from impact as a tool to create the impact.
Yes.
So when I say that, what does that mean to you? And can you give us a little bit of background on how that's been shown up for you in your life and in the imprinting you've done on your community?
Yeah, the first thing that resonates for me when you say that is the energetic version of that when we're manifesting and wanting to activate the manifestation by being very clear with what we want, right? Being very as visual as you can, embodying all the senses so you can feel all the things and speak the right words. So we're giving power to things and not to the focus of what we don't want, but then also detaching and letting it go, which is the part of manifestation that I think a lot of people forget is the detachment piece, which my metaphysical brain is always aware of. Because again, nerd life forever, right?
Well, and especially those of us who are so we're so good at getting shit done. Excuse my language. Like we can make it happen. That detachment part feels terrifying.
It is. And to your point of something that you said, for the people listening to this that weren't in the room with us in October in North Carolina, you talked about safety and feeling safe enough to slow down and safe enough to give yourself permission to pause and safe enough to take a break, right? Like all the things. That detachment piece is very similar. Is often we won't detach because we don't feel safe enough to do it, which is like a interlocking Lego piece of sorts that has to be there. So for me, my safety part of it in order to detach is I had to look at where I felt unsafe because being unsafe felt more familiar than being safe.
Yeah.
And realizing, and that started most intimately with my forever lover, my soul's half, my husband of almost 30 years. As years ago, thank God, multiple decades ago at this point, we went through a really deep space where he had to say, I'm not your enemy. You don't have to fight me. You don't have to. And he didn't mean physically. Luckily, that's never been a part of our relationship. But I was like, ugh, like always ready to go to bat with anything. He could make me a beautiful meal, and he's very his love language is acts of service. So he could make me something or make sure that I had room temperature water because my teeth are sensitive and I don't like ice cold water available. Like he would do all these things for me, and my thing would be to fight. Like, well, why didn't you do this else? Or wasn't this ready for the kids? Or why wasn't, right? Like I would jump past it. And although I'm strength based with everyone else who don't have the proximity to me, right? Like being so up and close, I'm strength based with them. And I would always look at the positive before I said anything else. With my husband, who is my person, who is the closest to me, who gets all of the energy, not just the energy that's, put in red lipstick and high heels. He gets all of it. He was getting a lot of the broken hill energy of like, oh, my feet hurt. I'm tired. Like all of that was coming. And he had to be honest with me about what he was expecting, which wasn't this. He was like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not the life that I want to make with you. I want a version of you that is the version that you are because you're able to give it to other people. But by the time you get back to me from the end of your day, you don't have any. And a lot of it was because in a reverse way that we're using this, I wasn't detaching. I had a lot of vicarious trauma from all of the things. As a trauma specialist in emergency rooms and crisis centers and special delivery units and NICUs, I saw a lot of heavy, heavy stuff. And I was really good at dealing with all of the heavy stuff, but I wasn't good at detaching from it and being able to not bring it home. And that was where the pain really started to spark for me when they started showing me the vomit bag that I was vomiting in. Like my family was like, hello, we didn't ask for this. We don't want this. You can take it back with love. And in those very beautiful conversations where my husband and I had to increase our conflict intimacy and really share what was hard for us to share, that's where I started to really look deeper at like, okay, you're not detaching in a good way. I don't want to be desensitized. I don't want to be that person who can't be compassionate because they're so hardened from all of the stuff, their stuff, the other people's stuff. But I did need to be able to detach, and I'm an empath. So all of that just made for a really beautiful or yucky soup. And I was in the yuck of it instead of in the beauty of the nourishing part of it. So for me, when I hear detachment, to your point, I think of the energy of why it's beautiful to detach, not negative to detach. But then I also look at the benefit of what that looks like. And for me, that brings me into being intentionally selfish. The whole purpose of me redefine it was to reclaim power around detaching, right? Like creating that spaciousness for yourself so you can hear you. You can see you. You can empathize with you. You can forgive you and accept you and fold all of the parts of you into one person and not have a split identity or constantly disassociate, because that's the easiest way to just keep going and just keep doing. What's the Nemo movie? Just keep swimming,
Yeah.
just keep swimming, right?
Yeah.
And that has a place. There are moments when you just need to keep moving forward, but there's also so much beauty in literally detaching so that you can have the space to hear your own inner brilliance and trust it, so you can work a little less and really feel like, okay, I'm moving towards the right activation path and not moving towards FOMO and fear of missing out and whatever the other acronyms for that are, but really being able to hear you. So for me, detaching is a crucial part of imprinting, because without it, there's a bunch of impactful moments that don't get embodied, that I can't immerse because I didn't detach from all the busyness long enough to really hear the lessons that were gifted to me from the universe, that were gifted to me because the universe used Tarryn, because the creator of the universe decided that this is a person you need to meet, and so on and so forth. But you can't hear it when you're so busy. So I think detachment is an ingredient in that cake of imprinting, just as much as impacting is an ingredient in that cake of imprinting.
So good. And also, you revisited this idea of why you're doing it. What is the reason for the impact? What
Yeah.
is the reason? And sometimes knowing that and getting out of the FOMO and the need for the external validation, the impact that impact will bring. Oh, so good. So good. So good. So many things.
Thank you.
I want to know about, because I'm always fascinated about this question, about younger Naketa.
Woo.
7, 8, 9-year-old Naketa. What
Mm.
did she want to be when
When I
she
grew
grew
up,
up? Mhm.
little Naketa is so much spicier than I am now. Um, I've learned that all the spice wasn't right, and not everybody can handle the hot, spicy part of me. I was very sassy, but sassy is good. And I was super spicy. I needed a lot of structure that I didn't have in a traditional way. The family that raised me, which was my grandmother and my step grandfather predominantly, they were very rigid. There was a lot of heavy religiosity and a lot of don't do's without a lot of teachable moments of what can you do, what should you do, how should you do it. And that just, it made for a really interesting woman. So or young lady. So when I was little, I said that I was going to be a pediatrician with a psychology practice on the side of my house. It was very specific. And I remember my grandmother, who was a nurse at the time, I think she was still in her licensed practitioner nurse mode. She ended up becoming a registered nurse and was working on her NPN, but at that time she was an LPN. And I remember telling her that I wanted to do this. And she was like, oh no, you can't do that. You'll never make any money. Stay away from all social sciences. Don't do that at all. Which made me want to do it more. Because again, I'm the kid that touches the hot fire multiple times until I feel it's hot enough for me to stop taking it. And I'm still kind of that kid, but that was very much who I was without even thinking. So when I said that I wanted to do that and she told me, no, like you can't, then I was like fixated on it. And it was
Mm.
very serious. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to become. And of course, when I hit college and had pre-calc, I was like, oh, I don't like calculus. No, this is not my life. I'm not doing this. And organic chemistry, I hated them, but I digress.
That is so fascinating. And so what did she love to do, little
Mm,
Naketa? So she had this dream of being a pediatrician with the psychiatry practice attached to the house, but what did she
yeah.
love to do?
Little Naketa wrote a lot. I listened to music a lot. It was one of the things that I could sneak in my room is I could listen to the radio back
Mm.
in the day, 99 FM. If, I don't even know if that's still a station, based out of Philadelphia, by the way, for anyone who's listening to this. Like, what channels are you talking about? So I would listen to the slow groove of R&B. I loved love
Mm.
songs. I love to write poetry. I love drawing trees. I love staring at trees. Like, trees and the moon were so much more fascinating to me than the
Mm.
sun for some reason, even though I value both of them, obviously. But I was very attracted, very drawn to trees, and the moon, especially how the trees kind of shadowed across the moon and all of that. And I loved to run. Running was therapy for me. I couldn't run far. I literally could only run on the block because, again, they had a tight grip. You typically had to sit on the front step and wasn't able to like
Mm.
really go with the other kids. But when I could sneak and there wasn't anyone sitting at the window, I would literally go to the top of block and run as fast as I could to the end of the block and then run my back right back to the stoop and sit down. And I would wait and I would catch my breath and I would wait for another opportunity. And I would do that so often that neighbors would be like, you didn't go for your run for today. Like, we didn't see you running. I loved it so much. And she wouldn't, they wouldn't let me join track or any of the other things because you weren't supposed to be with worldly people. So it was like a whole other
Mm.
thing that I had to contend with. But I love to run. I love to write. I love to draw the trees that look like sticks, but mostly because I love staring at them and kind of dreaming into
Mm.
them.
And how have you seen I love those stories, and I've got such a beautiful image of you now as little Naketa. I love those stories, thank you. But how have you seen those desires, those dreams that you had kind of transition and translate into this beautiful woman that you become now?
It's interesting. I did not become a pediatrician, guys. I did not. I got to the end of my first year. I went to Drexel University for undergrad, so it was a 5-year program. I got to the end of the first year and was like, yeah, no, I don't want to do pre-med. But I kept my triple majors and all the things. As a balance and relationship advisor with a global personal development company, I think the version of psychology practice that I saw is still there. But also, I'm a homeopath, I'm a metaphysician, I'm many, many, many things that, again, I don't talk about all the hats because then people try to put you into a box that they can handle. So I just stick under balance and relationship advisor. But with that, there's a lot of healing, like a pediatrician, of
Mm.
inner child trauma and issues and layers of hurt, because it's not always the deep wound. Sometimes it's the infection from the wound not being treated well that spreads
Mm.
and threads through. And I am a healer. Like, I am very well aware of the gift that I was given and the privilege and responsibility that comes with it, even though I'm not specifically a bar certified pediatrician working with children, right? But it's definitely shown up in so many ways. And I kind of had to find my way back to it. With the trees, it's very much related to I'm just thinking about my son. In 2009, I came home after receiving the download of what would be it's Big Pro Balance and Relationship Management Institute is the company we own. But all I could see was like Self-Care Institute. I couldn't see all of the layers, and I could see like signs of certifications, and I could see people, being healthier, and I could just see so many things. And I described it to my husband, my son, and my daughter was very, very little. She's a 2000 baby, so she was really little at the time. And my son said, who's now 27, he was like, Mom, it sounds like you're talking about a tree. Maybe that should be your logo. And which is not, my logo is an infinity symbol, but at the time, my rebuttal to that was like, that's such a good idea, honey. But a lot of financial companies have trees as their logos. And my instant, which tells you the money mindset I had, the stuff that I had to work on at the time, my instant thought was, I don't want people to think that it's just about the money. And
Mm.
because I'm not a monetarily driven person. We have a premium service. We're a premium company. There is an investment to work with us for sure, but it's about the outcome and the imprint and the legacy that they're creating. Because our mission is all over our website. It's to build stronger families. Like, that is the focus. And the what do you call it? Out of the mouth of babes. He was like, so like, so it's for financial companies, but I was still struggling with perception, right? Like, I don't want to have people perceive it to be something that is not, even though the tree was representing of all the growth and all the branches and all the generations and all of it that he could see at such a young age. And I was just still stuck on like, no, people aren't going to understand that correctly. They're not going to read it right. Well, the reality is people are going to read whatever they want to read. And many of them are going to walk away totally understanding you or not understanding whether you use a tree or not.
Yes, absolutely. Let them think what they want to think, and
That part.
let them be attracted to it if they are. That's so good.
Yeah.
I am so fascinated with when women reach their stride and find that place of true impact, how often it's reflected in our little baby girl selves
Mm.
and this undoing that we needed to go through over decades of undoing the learning that had covered up all that magic that that little girl knew in her 6 7 year old imagination. And I love you sharing that story, thank you, with us, and
Thank you.
allowing us to peel back those layers and see what that little girl had, the fire that she had, the spunk that she had, and allowing her to finally find her stride. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for asking. It really was a beautiful way to you asking the question to just look at how it has interwoven down to I'm still attracted to the moon and to trees, and I still write a ton, not so much poetry as much as healing prompts, but it's all the same. So
And
yeah.
even being attached to your house, I mean,
Mhm.
metaphorically attached to your family and the
Yes.
healing in your own family, which
Mm.
I know is an ongoing project for you.
Yes.
But isn't that so beautiful that that office was attached to the home? We're not going to leave the home. We're not going to
Mhm.
leave behind all the
Mhm.
beautiful people that need healing and support in the home. We're actually going to
Yes.
attach it on there and do a little bit of both.
Yes, I never looked at it that way, Taryn. I often saw it as because I'm so intimate with people
Mm.
and the intimacy allows me to be private, allows me to hold their privacy. And some of it is the clinical hat talking, like be confidential, right? All the things that you and I were both groomed into holding space for.
Yes.
But I also know that the gift was in the intimacy. And I always thought it was that until you gave that other visual, which, like, yes, who knew that I was speaking into my future?
There you go. I love it. I love it. We always are. We always are.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, my friend. It is so, I could chat with you for hours because
Same.
the words that come out of your mouth, I just want to reflect one thing I wrote down. I'm sure there's so many takeaways. I'm going to go back and listen to this beautiful interview again myself because the nuggets you dropped, Naketa, are so precious.
Thank
One of the
you.
things you said was, it's not always the deep wound, it's the infection around the wound that spreads.
Yes.
Oh, my friend, I am taking that and running with it. I'm going to be journaling about that tonight. That is so beautiful.
Amen.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
beautiful. Thank
I'm
you.
I'm honored by you holding space for this conversation. And I told you before, like I think it's beautiful that you're connected to the youth because those are when the scripts were made.
Mm,
All of those early scripts were imprinted third trimester to between 7 and 9. And that's such a key space for what we do at 30 and 40 and 50 and 70. It
yes.
does still show up.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, my friend. So much love to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here. And thank you to all of you for listening in on this beautiful conversation and for being in this space with us. And I'm just so honored to, as I mentioned before, introduce you to this magical person and take care of you and, follow your dreams. That's, I think, the biggest thing that I wanted to bring forth with this series is a reminder that when you have that burning desire to make an impact, to make an imprint, to have a disruption in the status quo, to make a change, to flow and follow through with that and give yourself permission. And I think Naketa just showed us beautifully today what a gift it is when you can honor yourself in that journey. Thank you so much, my friends. Remember, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to the Business of Happiness podcast. If this episode brought you new perspective and value, I invite you to subscribe so that you catch all upcoming episodes and leave us a review. And if you know of a friend or colleague who could benefit from this perspective, share this episode with them and empower their day. For more information about the Business of Happiness and the Radical Happiness for Practitioners course, find me on www.thebizofhappiness.com. See you there.